mentioned the Midnight Express. Our next question is from Fan Week alumni Tim Knoll, an old friend of mine, host of Wrestling Power in Richmond, Virginia.
Hello, Tim. We won't knock you.
Before Tully and Arn left, what was the booked conclusion to the MX Tully and Arn feud? How long was the series of matches supposed to go? Had Dusty planned out how the feud was going to develop past the first round of house show matches that were mostly double DQs until the title change on the last night?
Well, we should have asked Dusty this, because I'm sure none of us knew any of that. Dusty may not have known all of it, because, see, at that point, when he shot the first fucking angles and promos, and we had the first round of matches, the houses were so good that I'm sure that was a sign in those days that the booker, okay, I'm gonna stretch this out. Sometimes you just knew, I'm going to have these guys in a program for the next 3 or 4 months, or if it was a weekly territory for the next 2 or 3 months or whatever the fuck. And you would feel it as you went. I'm trying to figure out how to explain it. It's not, you wouldn't sit down and plan everything out past the next show. Every time you went to a show, you had the next show in that town booked if it was a regular town. But you wouldn't sit down and go, okay, they're going to have a match, and we're going to do a DQ. And then we're going to come back and no DQ, and the heel's going to fuck the guy with the goddamn foreign object. So we come back the next week, and the goddamn foreign object on a pole, or whatever the fuck, and every stipulation out. It was more like, okay, these first round of houses, look at the fucking houses. It's going to be great. So we're just going to have these guys do a double fucking schmaz or whatever the fuck and get out of it. Because I know on TV I'm going to do such and such. And we'll come back next time and it'll be a no DQ match. Or they were going to have in Philadelphia to pop a house because he was still trying to get things up for the TBS sale. It was going to be double cage after the double count out. Tully and Arn against the Midnight Express and me against JJ. Right? And just shit like that. And you just see how it goes. And a lot of times when it stops drawing, especially in Memphis, they believed in this. If you shot an angle or you had a fucking main event going and one house was really miserable or a couple houses in a row were bad, they would change your shit. So it wasn't so cut and dried. It was more of a free-flowing thing. And when things happened between the talent in the matches that they just came up with and did on the spur of the moment, or involved in the finish, the things they contributed or things they said in the promo, those would be incorporated. And I was talking to a guy we're going to talk about the Avett Brothers concert more this week on the Experience, but their manager, Dolph Ramser, mentioned that he remembers seeing on TV when Ricky Steamboat ripped Ric Flair's suit off when Flair had the models on his arm. One of them was Beth, his next wife.
No.
On what wasn't it? It was Beth, wasn't it?
It was Bonnie.
It was Bonnie. That's right. It was Bonnie instead of Beth. All right. Well, say the other guy's wife. The point is, or when they fucking Flair and Blackjack, when Blackjack wore Flair's robe down and tore it up in front of him while he was wrestling, and Flair did where he stomped his fucking hat. You remember that shit past what you remember these days when, you watch a program and the next week you can't remember what happened because it wasn't overly written and scripted and thought out. It was those guys sitting there and telling George Scott, hey, we're just talking. What about if I came out and fucking stripped Flair down to his fucking undies? Okay, yeah, there you go. So that was the way that shit. It was a booker directing. It was the talent that knew what they were doing, contributing, and it wasn't necessarily just planned out in advance. So with the way that the houses were looking, we probably would have run 6 months. We would have been pretty much full-fledged baby faces at the end, so we would have needed a reason to turn back because the original Midnight thing probably would not have happened. Because we would have been stuck for opponents and me be able to kind of, get the word in. Although, it still would have been an idea that I would have wanted to do. So it just depended on what the business was like the next year after we had run with them for 6 months or whatever. And obviously they probably would have triumphed in the end, because at the time, I'm pretty sure if Dusty was still the booker, he would have thought about turning us back heel where we should have been, rather than, run us as baby faces too long and kind of flatten us out, which ended up happening.